I'm going to be brutally honest because I think people tend to sugarcoat this process. I just wasn't smart enough. And is that 100% fair? No, I don't think so. Because I did have a moment where I was like, man, SQL's kind of boring. Lie your way in. I think that's probably the only way. Which at the time I was very broke. So I was like, dude, $2,000 a year? That's insane. You're doing something amazing here, Avery. This is genius.
So out of context.
Welcome to the Data Career Podcast, the podcast that helps aspiring data professionals land their next data job. Here's your host, Avery Smith.
All right, welcome back to the Data Career Podcast. I'm here with the GOAT, Alex the Analyst, and we're going to have a fun podcast for you guys today. Alex, thanks for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, we are in your, I want to say hometown, but not your hometown, your home base for the time being in Charleston. And we're here with Posit, so thank you, Posit, for having us here. If you guys haven't seen Alex before, you guys haven't tried to learn data analytics, I think is a fair statement. So I want to know, how has the last year been for you, just in terms of YouTube? You've gone from, I remember when we were in Utah together, you had just hit 500,000, I think. Or maybe it was 200,000.
I think a year and a half ago I was around 350, 400,000. And right now I'm about 725. And so, the last year and a half has been a really big increase. I think one, just because now YouTube, hit the YouTube algorithm pretty well, and so more people are seeing me, but also I think more people are coming into the data analytics space. Even with AI and everything that's going on, I feel like a lot of people are seeing that as still a really good career path and a good stepping stone for other careers. So if they, are data engineering is going to really take off with AI, people are still well, how do I get into data engineering? I need to learn some of the, core concepts which data analytics has. And so a lot of people are, venturing into data analytics who, may not have before. They go straight into data engineering. And so they see it as a really great career path. And so I have seen a huge influx of people over the past year and a half, 2 years.
I bet. The thing that's interesting with what you just said was a lot of people do try to go straight from a non-technical career or some other career into a data scientist role or a data engineering role. And from my experience, in fact, when I first started my company, Data Career Jumpstart, that was I wanted to make people data scientists. Yeah. And I found out it's actually really hard to make someone a data scientist from scratch. Yeah. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And so I think that's an under talked about opportunity where you can become a data analyst. And then you can get paid to learn data engineering as a data analyst because you're going to be learning some of those skills no matter what. Yeah. And then go down the road. So are you saying that as well? That's a good entry place?
Well, not only did I see it, that was also my experience. So I was a data analyst on a data collection team, and it was under the data science umbrella. So I was as a Fortune 10 company, and I was a data analyst, but I worked very, very closely with our data engineers, database developers, and data science teams. And after about 2 years in there, I was doing a lot of data engineering style work, creating pipelines or fixing pipelines, doing the transformations and or fixing those transformations. And so the data engineering team wanted me to join their team, and the data science team at the same time wanted me to join their team as a data engineer and a data scientist. And then I got the offer to be a manager of analytics. And so at the time, I chose the manager path, but I had the opportunity to go data engineering, and I would not have ever had that opportunity or gone down that path or even thought about it if I hadn't been a data analyst first. I do regret a little bit not taking the data engineering job because I love the technical pieces of how everything fits together. And it's very challenging technically, which I really love. And so I think it's a great place to start for a lot of people. And I think that's why data analytics continues to be a really popular job title that people are searching for people who are transitioning into the data world, because it's a kind of a soft landing for some people, or they can take data analytics all the way up to manager, VP, CTO level if you have the right education and background and experience.
With all the people that are getting into data analytics, do you think it's saturated? That's one of the questions I feel you probably get asked the most.
It's been saturated since I was in analytics, 8 years ago. It's the tech space ever since probably the data science boom has been very saturated. Everybody has been wanting to get into it. So there's no doubt in my mind it's been very saturated. This market right now at the beginning of 2024 is also just, back in 2023, with all the layoffs and all the economic pressures that are going on right now, in the U.S. it's just not a great market for anybody. And so that is a piece that I think is a little bit different than when I was getting in. It wasn't as bad. And so The data analyst market, though, is still very much alive. People are getting hired all the time. I still get messages, just like anecdotally, I still get a lot of messages, people saying, hey, I just landed my first job. And so it's not like it's dead, it's just harder than it used to be.
I don't think it's like it was years ago. I think the end of 2023 was actually pretty tough. I think with the new budget of 2024, it's not as high as a hiring budget as it has been in the past, but it's at least way better than it was at the end of 2023, which is good.
Well, it's also cyclical.
Yeah.
So like there was this big surge in hiring and they, hired millions and now they've laid off several, maybe like 100, 200,000. So I mean, we're still a surplus. So it's not like hiring has gone down net negative. We're still at a huge positive. It's just companies overhired in 2021, 2022. And so then now they're decreasing their workforce to save money and economic pressures from shareholders and all these big companies. But to be honest, I definitely see there's going to be starting to go up again. I think towards the end of 2024 and then into 2025, we're going to see a lot more hiring than we have in 2023, 2024, just because of those factors.
I agree. I'm excited to see what will happen. I want to go back to how you got into analytics.
Okay.
Because you have a recreational therapy degree.
Yeah, that's right.
That's like the most STEM degree of the STEM degrees, am I not mistaken?
It's a very odd degree. You don't see that. You don't see it in the wild that much.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare.
Okay, so you studied recreational therapy. Your goal was to go get a master's in occupational therapy.
Correct.
Life kind of hit you. You met a girl.
Yeah.
You're like, oh crap, I got to get married and
Yeah.
I got to make some money.
Yeah.
And you kind of stumble. You were working at this company, small company, right?
Yeah. It was a nonprofit.
Nonprofit.
Yeah.
You're working there, and a data role opens up. Not a data analyst role.
Correct.
I believe the title was like
Data collection.
Data collection.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, Alex the Analyst, okay, spoiler alert, he ends up, your wife asks you, but challenges you to apply for this job.
Yeah.
You apply.
Yeah.
And you get it kind of by default because you're like the only applicant.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And all of that was like very serendipitous. I was basically the lowest position at the nonprofit, just taking care of people's day-to-day needs, cooking, cleaning, helping them get jobs, paperwork. And like you said, the job opened up. My wife was like, "You're smart. Like, go for it. Do it." And I was like, "Oh, it's just Excel. I mean, I could probably do that." But that was the gateway to opening up like a world that I had never known about and learning about SQL and databases and actual data collection practices and all these different things. And that was like the gateway of how I got into analytics.
Which is so crazy because I just want to like emphasize here, Alex the Analyst did not have a computer science degree.
No, nothing even remotely close.
Yeah, recreational therapy, which
Yes.
sounds fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
It has the word recreation in
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
but maybe not very math involved. And then the other cool thing I really liked about that is when you were trying to break into data, one of the first things I talk about in my boot camp is the easiest way to break into data is not externally, it's internally. Because if you're at your company, they already know, oh, hey, this Alex guy, he works hard, he's nice, he's shown some promise. And so you might get an opportunity that like if you would have applied to like a data analyst role outside your company at that time, you probably wouldn't have gotten it.
Definitely not.
Which is crazy.
Not. Yeah, well, I agree with you because at the time I didn't even really know what a data analyst was. It just was like something I thought might be interesting. And it was like Excel, so it didn't seem crazy difficult. But like you said, during that, I was 6 months in that, it was called a resident advocate position. 6 months in that position, I got to know all the managers and all the people, and they all really liked me. And there were two other teams that wanted me to join their team. One is a project manager, and then this data collection one. And so I actually interviewed for both. And the data one just seemed more interesting to me, seemed more like what I would enjoy doing. And I think it paid just like a little more, like $2,000 extra a year, which at the time I was like very broke. So I was like, dude, $2,000 a year? That's like insane. And so it really was one of those things where all the pieces just aligned and I kind of happened to be in the right place at the right time. But also I saw a future. When I got it, I was like, I could see myself liking working in like Excel and collecting data. It sounded interesting. And then of course, like I just like fell head over heels for it and just like I still haven't stopped learning. Even today, I still like build projects that are really new to me and complicated and challenging. So I'm like still even to this day really learning a lot.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the good signs of a good analyst.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to point out is this was not even like a data analyst job,
Right.
but it was data analyst work at the end of the day?
Kind of. It really was data collection for like grants. Like we had to, the nonprofit had to collect data for grants and stuff like that. And so I didn't know anything about it. But what really triggered my, like, I see this as like a full-time career, because I just was doing it first to get some money and I thought it would be interesting, was that we were trying to change databases from mostly Excel work into having Salesforce. And so we got this grant money to invest in a new database. And so my company chose Salesforce. We brought in a consultant, and the consultant was like, oh, you're the data guy, so do you guys use SQL? And I was like, what is SQL? And I remember the look in his eyes. He was like, what is SQL? He's like, how do you not know what SQL is? Like, I could see it in his eyes, but he was just like, oh, well, SQL is like, there's SQL databases where you can use a SQL query language to query the data. I went home that night because I was like, that sounds interesting. I have no idea what it is. I just Googled it. And that night, like, I just started like a course, downloaded Microsoft SQL Server, and every night for the next like 4 months, I just studied it. And I became what I would consider as like entry level, maybe. I didn't really even fully understand joins after all that time, because I was learning semi on my own, and the courses back then weren't as good as what are available now. And so I really loved it. I just didn't understand it that well at the time. But that helped me land my next job, which needed SQL. And so then I had a SQL Excel, and then they taught me Tableau in my next role. And so again, I just kind of like stumbled into this all by accident, and it's gone well for me so far.
Well, I think that's so great. And I just love that you were self-studying. I think that's so impressive. And there was no Alex the Analyst that you could watch YouTube videos on at the time.
Very, very few YouTube videos on like data analytics where they would teach you anything.
When I was first learning data analytics, this is so funny. This is going to make me sound like I'm a million years old. But like, I went to the library and I checked out books.
Yeah.
And that was like how I learned. Like
Yeah.
which just sounds so archaic now. But regardless, okay, so you're at this data collection job. It's like a little data analytics-y. But first off, it had the word data in there.
Correct.
And it gave you a chance to learn a new skill, SQL.
Correct.
You learn SQL, you're going to find this new job. Is this at the point where you were like, crap, I have these skills, but how do I prove I have these skills? I need some sort of a portfolio.
Yeah.
And so did you put SQL scripts on your resume?
Yeah, that was like before I knew what a portfolio was, because I had never heard of it. Again, I put myself back in that space. I remember being like, I want people to know that I know the skill. I just don't know how to show it. I didn't know what a portfolio was, so I didn't build one until I was like 3 years into my career. And so I was like, I want them to know that I know SQL. And so I had done like some little project at home or on my personal computer, and I was like, oh, this looks kind of impressive. It has some joins, and it has some aggregations, and I just put those queries on like a separate sheet behind my resume. And so I sent that in, and I was like, hey, make sure to, not just send them the resume, send them the resume and my like SQL sheet, essentially. And so it was like a crazy simple version of what I recommend people doing today, which is creating a portfolio. So I kind of, there were portfolios out there. I just wasn't smart enough or wasn't aware of what they were.
I think that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Just like a second-page resume. Here's my SQL scripts.
Yeah, that's what it was.
They're so entertaining. You got to read these SQL scripts. But once again, I really relate to that, because when I was breaking in, I was doing a lot of in-person interviews. I wasn't like applying a ton online at the time. Going to a lot of job fairs and stuff. And so I had this brown binder.
Yeah.
With like my graphs in it. And I'd show you my graphs in my manual portfolio. So we've come a long way.
Yes.
There's a lot easier, better ways to show people stuff now.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot easier.
Which is crazy. I'm just thinking about Alex the Analyst going around. Have you seen my SQL scripts? Have you seen my SQL scripts?
Well, at the time, I was nobody knew Alex the Analyst. I wasn't a thing yet, and I was fresh out of college. Really, I was at that time maybe only 1 year out of college with a degree in recreational therapy. So like you said, I just gotten married, and I felt I wanted to provide for my family, but I just wasn't able to because of my background. And so I was like, I'm not going to let that limit me. I'm going to really follow this, which I started to have like this really intense feeling like this could be a career. And so, a lot of people out there that I've talked to or mentored in the past had that very similar experience where they're like, well, I'm doing warehouse work, but in my warehouse job, I'm working on this computer, I'm working in Excel, we're using databases like for cataloging data, the warehouse data and all this stuff. He's like, I really like it. And so I've worked with people specifically like that who are just like, but then I like really fell in love with the data piece of it. And like all those things that we started doing, I just needed the technical piece and I needed to get a chance. I needed a chance to showcase like I can do this. And so, I think people who I've noticed who really succeed in this is the people who are like, I need to prove myself and I need to really push myself beyond what I think, what I currently am at. I need to push myself beyond that to show people that I can do it. And so those are the people I've seen like really tend to do well. Yeah.
Because if we look at what you did, I mean, you applied for a job where you weren't really qualified for that data collection job.
No.
You were, in fact, behind every great man is a great woman, and like your wife really was the one who pushed you to do that.
Yes.
So it took confidence. It took like you going out of your comfort zone. Learning SQL, going out of your comfort zone, putting those scripts on your resume out of your comfort zone. You got to kind of take these risks to go anywhere.
Big time. It was all calculated risks. I was at the time I was making $47,000 in the data collection specialist and analyst job. My wife was making like double that, and so I'm like, I don't think my current trajectory is doing me any favors here. But I was like, I really need to push myself past what I'm limiting myself in my head to, because that is the piece that I was like, if I don't change something, I'm going to be stuck at a lower paying job for a long time. And when I was single, I didn't care about that. But when I was married, I was like, it wasn't a hierarchy thing. Like I need to make more than my wife. It was just, I want to be a provider. I don't want to have my wife to feel the pressure of her making all the money. And so I met a lot of people who are in very similar situations who were able to get that first job and have now, texted me after like 3 years, because I'm doing this for a while. And they're like, hey, I just got a promotion. I'm like, dude, that is amazing. It's incredible. And, they pushed themselves beyond what they were comfortable in and really made it work and like changed their whole career future, which is just incredible.
It is. And I should have started the podcast this way, but we as a whole need to thank you for all your contributions. You've made
that's too much.
No, we do. Because you've done a lot for the data community. You've done a lot of videos. I mean, your contributions are crazy. So thank you. I should have started the video that way.
No, and to be fair, like I do it because I love it and I like giving back. They're genuinely, like, now I make a little bit of money from doing YouTube, but still to this day, I feel like giving back to that kind of open source community is literally the least I could do, because I had so many people help me when I was early on in my career, like mentors and people online who I reached out to and asked questions to. Like, they did so much for me. And so the videos that I make and the advice that I give and all these things, I feel like is just my part in giving back to the community that helped me so much when I first started out. And so I wouldn't be here without all of those people. And so now I get to be that person for other people. And that is like, it's really heartwarming. It like feels really good.
I bet it does feel good, but we're grateful anyways, regardless if you feel like it's just kind of fun and you giving back.
Well, I appreciate it.
I want to talk about, so like we talked about, you getting hired, but then eventually you become a manager.
Right.
Yeah. So when you were hiring people, like what was important in a candidate for you? Like what was the first few things you were looking at?
Yeah. I'm going to be like brutally honest, because I think people tend to sugarcoat this process, and the hiring process is a lot of people on like LinkedIn or YouTube will tell you like the sugar-coated version. I'm going to tell you what I truly looked for. I was on a hiring team when I was a data analyst. I was the one who gave the technical interviews, and so that was my part of the hiring team. And then you're right, I became a hiring manager. And so then as the hiring manager, I did the whole process and usually brought in like my boss as well for some of like the final interviews. During the hiring, when I was on the hiring team, during that process, we were mostly hiring data analysts. I eventually started, when I was a hiring manager, was doing developers, database engineers, or data engineers, and then data analysts as well. So that was a little bit different. But on the hiring team, just for data analysis, we always looked for someone who had a good personality. And most people will tell you, I've seen it online, they're like, well, as long as you have the right skills and you get in there and you smile, that's what you need to do. I think when you're on a team, you really do look for someone who's going to fit well with your team. And so I always kind of gravitated towards people who are more outgoing. And is that 100% fair? No, I don't think so. But the hiring process isn't super fair. And so the people who are more outgoing, I tended to gravitate to, and so did my whole team. Our whole team was very outgoing, very social. And so we didn't want to someone come in and have a very different flow to them or personality to them. And so that's just like a brutal truth. You know, people always say diversity is like crazy good, but for personality, I think that piece of it is actually the flow of the team and how that people gel together is really important. The second thing we looked for is being able to articulate well their skills, abilities, and their experience. And so oftentimes we'd have people come in, and SQL is really important. When I was on the hiring team, SQL was the most important skill because we used it like really in depth for a lot of our processes. And so people would come in, and I was like, well, tell me how you've done, data cleaning, or tell me how you use SQL. And if people couldn't articulate really well, like, here's how I use it, they were just like, oh, well, I've taken a few courses in my job. I use SQL, but I don't really use it that much. And they would kind of beat around the bush, and I'd be like asking really pointed questions. If they couldn't articulate those questions that I would think is, if you've really used SQL well, you should know how to answer those questions. Because I can tell you, even at that time, I could be like, well, here's the process that I would take to clean data. Here's how I do that in SQL. Here are the exact steps. That's what you need to be saying. And people would beat around the bush and wouldn't want to say things. And that was always a big red flag. And then the last thing that I think we would look for is someone who is technically proficient. So I was the one conducting the interviews. We would always do some type of whiteboarding and then some type of general technical interview question. So the whiteboarding, like I'm sure is just someone gives you like a database or a table and is like, hey, write a query to do this. Nothing crazy. Like I would not try to trick people. Like, this is straightforward stuff. And we were hiring at like the mid-level. So mid-level analyst who has SQL on their resume for 3 years, this should be a no-brainer. This like super simple, like just aggregating something with a group by, nothing crazy, or just a simple join, just combine these two tables, and people would have trouble with it. And that was an immediate red flag, like we couldn't hire them. And so those three things I would say are the biggest things that we looked for and like really ranked on during those interviews. But if I'm being like completely honest, the personality thing was like 50% of it. If you have a good personality, then that like really puts you higher up. And it's not just like, I don't know, personality is very objective, and so it's hard to describe, but just somebody who's more outgoing, very friendly. That is like kind of what we were looking for. The being able to articulate and the technical interviews is the other 50%. So those two things were still very important, but if they looked like they were very teachable, if they looked like they were like really driven, and we were like, they may not be where we want them today, but I was like, that person will be good in like a month, we would still hire them. And we did that for one of our business analysts who we hired, where he kind of knew SQL, but his job wasn't as intensive in SQL for that position. So we were like, hey, let's hire him because he would fit really well with our team. And we trained him. He was my mentor, my mentee on my team. So I trained him in SQL, and within like a month he was up and running, and I didn't really have to help him that much anymore. So again, it was like that trainability piece, the attitude, how driven they were, did play a big role in who we hired. So I know I was long-winded on that, but that's a really tough process to talk about.
It is. I think you did really well. And although it was, you did talk about maybe the extrovert versus the introvert, I don't think it was too brutal. I think it's like an opportunity.
Yeah.
If you have a good personality and you maybe aren't the best technical person on planet Earth, you still have a chance.
Yeah. Well, I talk to a lot of people who give me that feedback. They're like, well, I'm a really big introvert. I get really nervous in interviews.
It's true.
And they're like, how can I get past that? And so there are things that you can do. I really believe in practicing before interviews, looking in a mirror and practicing smiling. Because believe it or not, I was that person back in interviews.
Yeah.
I used to be very, very nervous and very scared for interviews. I used to be much more introverted than I am now. I've worked through a lot of that as I got into the workplace, just by having to in order to like succeed on teams. But I used to be very, very, very nervous, and so what I would do is I'd practice in a mirror, and then I'd practice with my wife. And so she'd be like, oh, you're doing that weird. You're doing this weird thing. And she'd be really honest with me. And so I needed someone who could give me that feedback, and that helped immensely in interviews. So I feel like I can point even to myself as like a testament of someone who got over that and was able to push through. And then I was really able to understand, like, I have to do that in order to really be successful in an interview.
That's awesome. I think that's so impactful, and the practicing is a big thing as well.
Yeah.
Which is one one of the reasons why you built Analyst Builder.
Yeah.
Which goes back to that whiteboarding scenario with
Yeah.
that data analyst who was unable to, actually do the SQL problem under pressure.
Yes.
Now you've built Analyst Builder that really helps prepare you for technical interviews in SQL and Python, correct? You guys are rolling out Python?
Oh, Python's there.
Oh, Python's there. Okay.
Already built in, and so it's like you said, it's for the people who are about to like interview and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to pass a SQL technical interview. That's you don't want to fail it.
Yeah.
That's a big piece. You fail it, like I said, if someone failed my technical interview, which wasn't crazy hard, like it was almost immediate disqualification for the most part, unless there were other aspects that really made it worth it for us to invest in that person. But yeah, like you said, that's what it's there for, is you can get in, you can practice the questions, you can get really confident, and I have videos to walk through everything. And so the videos are like, people really like, because they're like, there's no pressure. It's just like Alex gets in there and I'm like, all right, let's work through this question. And I make a mistake here or there and I explain my thought process and how everything works on the back end and the front end. And it's really neat.
Yeah, I've used it. It's great. And one of the things I like that you do is I feel like, I'm sorry to say this, but I think SQL's boring.
Yeah.
Like SQL is like, and out of all the data, like maybe other than Excel for me, even in Excel, you can do some interesting stuff. SQL's like boring. It's
Yeah.
just like numbers,
Yeah.
And one thing I think you do a great job of with the problems in Analyst Builder is they're fun.
Yeah.
They're kind of fun.
Oh, I intentionally made it fun.
Yeah.
The questions themselves are like, I laugh when I make them because they're so goofy, and like the scenarios that I make are like real world scenarios.
Yes.
But I make them fun.
Yeah.
And I would, even when I like recording the videos for like but once you get to that level, it starts to get a lot more complicated. And so if you really like the technical piece of it, you can go almost like as far as like being like a data engineer or programmer or whatever you want to call it for SQL, because SQL gets crazy advanced.
It does get crazy.
And most people don't realize that. And so they're like, at the beginning, it can be very boring. And so if you use it really in depth, then it gets to me very exciting, because I started getting into a lot of the data engineering stuff. And that's when I almost had like a re-falling in love with SQL, because I did have a moment where I was like, man, SQL's kind of boring. But then I got like to the crazy stuff, and I like really loved the challenge. Like I've learned about myself, like I love solving problems and like challenges. That's why like Analyst Builder is like, I loved even making it, because it was so difficult to make and the questions are so challenging. Like I love the problem solving, the challenges. And so yeah, SQL and Excel both have like a high skill cap. So, but it's like everybody uses it mostly here, and then
true.
very few people ever get to like the crazy hard stuff.
That's very true. I have this question for you. Let's say someone came up to you and was like, "Hey, I want to be a data analyst in 7 days."
Yeah.
How would you tell them to spend their time in 7 days?
I would, if you only have 7 days, I wouldn't even learn the skills. I would just you'd have to lie on your resume and just be really like almost like a con man in your interview, and just like really sell yourself, and like maybe watch a few videos on like SQL interviewing, because that's probably what you'll get asked about. So if you can like lie your way in, I think that's probably the only way. 7 days is like not enough to even like learn a tenth of the basics.
It's definitely not. But one of the things, I mean, and I don't think we're ever advocating for straight up lying, but here's the thing, like your resume can say whatever the heck you want. Like,
That's true.
Like you literally can. And then in the interview, it's the interviewer's job to figure out, is this resume actually what we think it is, type of a thing.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
It's just not right.
But most of the people who I think are applying aren't trying to con anyone. And I think sometimes they lack the confidence to put certain things on their resume, or they lack the confidence to apply to jobs.
Yeah.
But what I think you're saying is like, look, like you could make up a resume and potentially land an interview.
Yeah.
And so you guys who have been spending months trying to break in, like if your resume is decent, you should be able to land some interviews. And then in the interviews from there, you can kind of decide, oh, I failed the SQL portion. I need to study SQL more. But I think so many people are so nervous to apply and to interview that they never do it.
Yeah, well, actually, to that extent, I completely agree. I think most people wait too long. In many of my videos, I tell people to start applying before you're ready, because there's only good things can come out of it. One, you get rejected and you're like, okay, I need to get better. Or two, you get an interview, and I guess there's 3 outcomes, but 2, you get an interview and you fail. Or 2, you get an interview and you get a job. And so really it's just a learning experience, because if you don't land anything, your resume is not very good, or you're not doing it the right way, and then you research on how to do it the right way. If you fail the interview, well, hopefully you can get some feedback on what you need to improve. Is it your communication skills? Was it your lack of experience? Did they not think that you do a good job in the technical piece, or what is it? So you can get feedback, and then you can improve on those things. So I think, if you know like the basics of SQL, Excel, Tableau, you should start building out a portfolio. And once you have that, I think you should start applying. You don't have to know at the mid-level or senior level. You don't have to go crazy advanced, because most entry-level jobs, they're not expecting you to know everything, and they are expecting to train you a little bit, because, look at it from the business side. They're going to pay you a little bit less than what they're paying a mid-level or senior level. So they're paying you, let's say, $50,000. They're not expecting you to do the work they're paying $85,000 or $110,000, which is where you will eventually get once you build up those skills. So they're getting a discount on an employee, knowing that they're going to train you and you're going to do a good job, probably at a lower salary for a while. That's why then a lot of people tend to job hop, because then you get those big surges in salary increases.
which is nice. But yeah, it's a great point that like you're entry level, and
Yeah.
so I mean, I know a lot of people are listening right now, and they're like, well, then make the job requirements entry level. But there are entry level opportunities
Yes.
out there for sure. They're just sometimes harder to find.
Yeah.
Okay, great. One last question for you, Alex.
Go for it.
What noise does a goat make?
What noise does a goat make?
Yeah.
No idea. Bah. Is that a sheep?
Perfect. Alex the goat. Thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
me
You
on.
guys can find Alex on YouTube, and you guys can check out analystbuilder.com.
Cool.